Random art tips and rambles with Rafi
Hola, you amazing artist. It's Rafi.
and Klee.
And today we're going to talk about the pros.
The pro.
Yeah, not the pros and the cons. We're going to talk about the pros.
The pros in your field.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, basically we didn't have a chance to record stuff because we had taken the hiatus. So this is just a random series of videos of us doing random things that you can enjoy while you listen to this podcast. This podcast is a really, really good one, you guys. So we're excited to share this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a really interesting question. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the question and then we can talk about this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Our question comes from Epskillion. And they ask, I've had some very talented and well-known artists compliment my work and then rip it off by creating something very, very similar, and then get noticed for it because they're famous in the illustration realm. I brought this up with a group of illustrators who make a living doing art and are some of the best, and they said, deal with it. It may be a jerk move, but it's legal. This person, to prove their point, then directly copied a piece of mine a week later. It was awful. I looked up to them, and they are in galleries and hosting really big YouTube channels that interview other artists. I feel I can't speak up because they have a larger following, so I just block them instead. What do you recommend when the pros are copying you and being nasty? Now, we've talked about people ripping off your work before, but this is another facet of that. And to be honest with you, it kind of makes me want to break out the sword of fiery justice and smite them upon the mountainside.
Yeah, me too. Me too. When I read that, I'm like, man, what a dick move to do something like that. Where you're talking to somebody who looks up to you because you're in the field, you have experience, and then you're going to take their creation and essentially rip it off. Now, we've talked about that before. Like, there's a difference between being inspired by someone's work and directly ripping someone off.
Yes.
Now, I wasn't there in that particular situation, so I don't know the exact details other than what she's saying. If I'm inspired by somebody's work, I am going to take a look at the piece and see, how can I make this my own? How can I put my voice into this thing? And when I'm inspired, I may be inspired by the color choices. Mm-hmm. I may be inspired by the subject matter. I may be inspired by maybe the shape of the eyes, the shape of the hand, something about the piece will have inspired me. Never ever have I ever seen someone genuinely be inspired by someone's work and them copy it.
Right. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, there is a huge difference between somebody being inspired by some work and somebody just directly copying.
Somebody who already has a little bit of fame, who's just directly ripping off artwork. I mean, that's just opportunistic. That's just parasitic.
It is. It really is. And it just doesn't make sense to me. The problem is, and it's one of the reasons that we get people that like thumbs down and criticize us, because we do have a little bit of fame. We have a pretty large following on YouTube. We have a following locally, and we also have a following on social media. And I think that a lot of people get the impression that you get in and you do your shtick, like right. you are kind of parasitic.
I think people forget the fact, some people sometimes forget the fact that we are working artists. We are here doing our art.
Exactly. And I think that the reason that happens is because you're also dealing with human beings. You know, it's kind of like people idolize like actors and different famous people, like public people. And you got to realize, like, we are all human beings, and you got to be careful with everyone, with the conversations that you have with people and whether or not you look up to them. Because even though that artist out there that you look up to may be somebody that you think would never do something like that, the fact of the matter is you gotta look at the situation one-on-one when you're dealing with it. And unfortunately, being in that position, you find yourself feeling trapped almost because you don't have the following that they have. So here you are creating this piece, and then all of a sudden they create it, and then they get the acclaim for it.
And you feel like you're taking on a giant if you try to say anything at all.
Yeah. And in those situations, because I mean, I've had situations like that with my trees, with other pieces, whether or not it was somebody that was just slightly more popular than me or somebody that was more popular than I was. And looking at some of the work and seeing how I quote unquote inspired them, you know, and with the piece, and realizing like, you know what, I'm just going to keep creating my stuff. Yeah. I'm just going to keep creating my stuff. And I don't care if somebody says that like, oh, that looks similar to so-and-so's, like, were you inspired by, like, I don't care. Because that's going to go back and forth. The fact is that like whatever it is that I'm creating, I'm going to keep creating it, and I'm going to keep improving on it, and I'm going to keep evolving. Whereas this person, whether or not they're famous or not, took my idea and just copied it and put it out there. So it's only a matter of time before they just move on and take someone else's idea. They're not going to keep evolving their art. They're not going to keep growing that art.
Eventually, they'll leave you alone and go pick on someone else.
Exactly. They'll leave you alone. They'll go pick on someone else, and then you'll still be evolving that style of art. You'll be the one that's growing with that style of art. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be remembered for it.
So basically what you're saying is you may not be able to take on a giant, but you just need to keep being authentically you and keep honing your craft.
Yeah, exactly. Don't concern yourself with what somebody does. If you want to unfriend them, if you want to block them because they're a-holes, that is absolutely fine. There are plenty of people, whether it be on YouTube or on social media, that I block because they're a-holes, because they're not supportive, they say some nasty stuff, and I just don't have time for that. You don't have time for anybody else's bullcrap. And it doesn't matter if it's someone who is famous or if it is somebody that you look up to. If they treat you in any way, shape, or form that is crappy, just block them and move on and just keep creating your craft. Create your craft for you, not for what anybody else is going to think or whether or not it is similar to somebody else's. Because on the flip side to this, there are a lot of people that are terrified to do a certain type of art because they know that someone else out there already does that art. And is it copying if I do that art? And it's like, no, just put your spin on it. Create the things that you want to create, and don't concern yourself with what anybody else is creating.
Yeah, that's something I've struggled with, was like being inspired with a particular technique and feeling like, oh, but I shouldn't use this technique, even though the technique in of itself is not specific to any one person.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about Viking knit. Like there's people out there are other jewelers that do the Viking knit because that's simply a technique that is used.
It's putting your own artistic spin on it, creating your own vision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That'd be like me saying like, well, you know, I love using the color blue, but this other artist out there uses blue. And then there are all these other artists, they use blue in their paintings. Like maybe I shouldn't use blue because then they'll think that I'm going through a blue period or something. You know, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. There are techniques and there are colors and there are styles and there is nothing new under the sun. It is pretty much like the keys on a piano. They're all the same damn keys, but everyone that plays the piano puts their own spin on it and creates their own stuff.
Absolutely. The thing that's new under the sun is your unique perspective.
Exactly. So if you have somebody that is copying your stuff, don't get bogged down by worrying about proving that it's yours or anything like that. Just move on, keep creating your stuff, keep creating it, diligently create it, stubbornly move forward with your creations, and let them, that's a miserable existence to have to go around and copy pieces in order to feel inspired. Like that's bullcrap. That's not even real art.
No, it's an empty thing, and it's a thing that's easy to burn out quickly with too if you're just copying, emulating, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not coming from a genuine desire to create.
Yeah, and how do you grow from there? Like how do you like, and don't get me wrong, I understand like a lot of artists when they're getting started and they're looking for their voice, it's the same thing as musicians. You're going to sing other songs, you're going to try and paint something that someone else painted.
Oh, totally.
Because you're pushing the limits of your understanding. You're pushing your boundaries and whatever. And eventually though, you start to find your own voice. The same thing happens in any creative craft where you're taking techniques and skills and you are applying it to the things that you like the most. That's essentially what finding your own voice is. It's all these little tidbits of other things that other people create that you like. Oh, I like the way that this happened on there. I like these colors. I like this combination of lines. I like this technique.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that and then kind of creating a stew. Like those are just the ingredients in the recipe, and then you're putting it in the pot and you're just kind of mixing it around, and then eventually you come up with your own voice, and then from there your voice just keeps evolving and growing as you add more ingredients into the pot.
Definitely. I mean, growing up, I always emulated singers that I looked up to, tried to learn their techniques so that I could improve on what I was doing so that I could write my song. But I also always gave credit where credit was due.
Yeah.
You know, I really liked this that I saw by this person, and so here's my take on it.
Yeah.
Or I looked up to this vocalist growing up, so I studied them, or whatever. You know, like credit where credit is due, and then my art, my creations.
Right.
It's disappointing also when you look up to someone and you find out just in of itself that they're not necessarily who you thought they might be.
That they're actually an a-hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The saying is, don't meet your heroes because they'll always let you down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? That's not true.
It's not true. It's not true. I've met people. I have a different way of approaching people, whether or not they're famous, whether or not they are, you know, like we meet a lot of people that meet us and they're like, oh my God, it's such an honor to meet you and stuff. And that's so cool because for me, it's like an opportunity to show you like, hey, this is me. This is who I am, whether or not we're recording a podcast or we're on video, and this is us now.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that it's awkward is days where like, I really don't want to meet anybody and we're going to Walmart and I don't feel great and people are like, hey, it's you. And I'm like, oh God,
oh boy,
I wish I was wearing a costume right now. But even still, like, I'm me, I'm who I am.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that a lot of people go out there and try to pretend to be one thing. And so when you meet them, it's extremely disappointing. The thing you got to remember is that people are people.
Yeah, we're dealing with, like you said earlier in the podcast, we're dealing with human beings.
Yeah, we're dealing with human beings. And one of the things that I always remember whenever I start to idolize somebody or I start to get nervous because maybe I'm going to meet them or am disappointed by something that they did is, and a lot of people have a problem with this mentality of mine or even the wording that I use, but everybody shits. Everybody pinches out a turd either in the morning, in the afternoon, or at night.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Because if they're not, then something... So whether it's Robert Downey Jr., whether it is the president, whether it is somebody that you really completely idolize, whether it's your mom, they are going to be sitting on the toilet, pinching one out at some point during the day. And that right there is quite possibly one of the most humanizing things that you could think of when you're looking at this person and you have them on some kind of weird pedestal where you think that they are immaculate and they don't do anything that is human-like.
Or even just above you in some way.
Yeah, exactly. No one is above you. Whether or not you are starting in your career, whether or not you've been an artist for a while, whether or not you want to be a musician, whether or not you are aspiring, whether or not you haven't started yet, it doesn't matter. No one is above you. Maybe they have more experience being out there, and so maybe they have some insight into certain things. But do not look up to them in a way, do not look up to me or Klee in a way that you think that like our shit doesn't stink, because it does sometimes, like recently one of the things that we experienced was we took a hiatus. And the reason that we took a hiatus was because we were getting overwhelmed and we needed to take a break. We needed to take some me time because we were trying too hard.
Yep.
And in those moments, it is very difficult to be a genuine person because your motivations are different when you are trying too hard than when you're just being you. So, anybody that met me during that time, they were going to meet me, but it was almost like a version of me that was just a little bit more stressed than the me that is actually the person that I like to be. So that's one thing to remember. It's like, they're just people.
Yeah.
They're just people. So and the reason that I say this is because a lot of people go into a relationship thinking something other than, like putting a lot of trust into somebody simply because they are a celebrity artist or because they've been in the field for so many years, so they know so much more than I do. And they sit there and hang on their advice and put enough trust into them and think that, oh, there's no way they would ever do this. But you got to kind of like meet people as people and just feel the vibe.
Yeah, understand that their motivations may not be 100,000,000% benevolent and altruistic. They're having their own struggles with their own insecurities. If they do something like rip off your art, it's not coming from a good place. Obviously, they're not creating from a pure place. They're having some kind of struggle of their own.
Yep.
And let it be a fire in you to be even more authentic, to be more authentically you, to keep putting your work out there.
Yeah, and stubbornly indignantly pursue your art and your style and keep creating your stuff, and don't let anyone, whether or not they have 1,000,000 people following them, whether or not they've been out in the art world for 30 or 40 or 50 years and they decided to take your thing and create it as their own. Don't let that stop you from creating your art the way that you want to create your art. Pay no mind to them, because within a very short amount of time, they're going to move on to whatever next project it is that they feel that they need in order to be able to keep moving forward.
On a side note, also, if you have famous people or even semi-famous people copying your work, you must be onto something.
Yeah, exactly.
You must be doing something awesome in the art field. And so keep growing that, and basically just don't worry about them. They'll peter out.
And honestly, anybody that follows you and follows the evolution of your art will see that you were definitely the creator of that, because we don't just get to a place and just create something. And that's always a red flag for me when I'm looking at some artists that I follow at their art, and then all of a sudden they have something that they created out of left field. A lot of times I'm like, okay, well that doesn't really fit your style.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a red flag, especially when I'm looking. I have a diversity of art styles that I do, but there is a similarity between all of them that is me, because it is my creations. It is stuff that I create. Absolutely.
There is a Rafi-ness in all of your work.
And I can't say that about every artist. There are some artists out there that are very popular, and I look at their work and I'm like, if I looked at this piece and I looked at that piece, I would not be able to tell that they were created by the same artist. Mm-hmm. And that always raises a red flag for me. So those are the things to look at when you're looking at whether or not you're... First of all, don't idolize people. They're just people. They are just people. Don't look up to people. Don't look up to me. I'm just a person who is doing this art thing, and I want to share these things with you, and I want to develop a relationship with you in this format. But I'm not right all the time. Like, I'm not right all the time.
That's true. We just have our life experiences and our opinions.
Yeah. Even this podcast right now, I am sharing my opinion with you based on what I know about the situation.
Right.
But still, at the end of the day, it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So I don't want somebody to idolize me. I want them to either agree or disagree with me. Plain and simple. If there was any advice that I could give you, is take everything with a grain of salt. And don't allow yourself to get hurt by somebody doing something like that to you. Just understand that they're doing that to themselves. They're limiting their creativity by having to scour the planet to find stuff to create. You just keep creating the thing that you're creating and keep evolving it and keep growing it and keep pushing at your own limits, and don't focus on anybody else's career or what it is that they're doing or what it is that they're doing to you. You just keep focusing on you and which direction you're heading, because ultimately that is the only thing that matters to you and your life and your career. And that's the only thing that's going to speak louder. It doesn't even matter how many people they have following them. that will speak louder than anything that they could do.
Well said. Thank you, Epskillion, for your awesome question. I hope that you enjoyed our opinions.
Yeah.
And I hope that you can find a place where you can stand in your personal power and forge your path, blaze your trail.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And yes, stand in your personal power and blaze your trail. I totally agree with Klee. We hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. This is a really, really powerful subject because it really delves deep into like just your own insecurities and kind of like your place in the world.
Yeah.
And I know that for a lot of us, when we first get started, we feel so small.
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact is, you're not. You're not small. You're big. You are big.
I'm big.
Just because somebody has more experience or they've been out there doing it or it doesn't matter. They have a bigger following. It doesn't mean that they're better than you. It just means that they have been at it a little bit longer. So don't ever compare yourself to someone else or what they're doing or whether or not they steal your stuff or they don't steal your stuff. You just focus on you because that is the only thing that matters. And I'm curious to know if you guys have had any issues like that where you've dealt with somebody that maybe you held in a high esteem and they just kind of like did something like steal your artwork or something stupid like that.
Generally treated you badly.
Yeah. Like maybe they were an a-hole and you were like, oh my God, I'm so disappointed that this person was an a-hole. Go ahead and share those stories with one another and we'd love to read those. And thank you so much for listening, you guys. You guys are absolutely freaking amazing. I totally adore you. And if you like this podcast and you like to listen to more like this, just click somewhere around here to subscribe. And that's it. Say goodbye, Klee.
Good day.
Adios.